how does it cover the risk of something coming in from China?
Well, because the importer and the distributor are also subject to the law, not just the person who's manufactured it in China.
So the defence that you would supply simply a marketplace, which some online firms advance, they would just supply the platform, the marketplace, that won't wash?
No, that won't wash. If it's being sold to somebody in the UK, there's somebody who's importing it into the UK or somebody who's distributing it in the UK, those people are subject to these regulations.
Angus Heatley. So go on, yeah, sure do.
Yeah, just to clarify, look, the consumer is buying directly, say from the media platforms, there might not be an import because it'll be a consumer who's the person put it in. So, I mean, to me it's unlikely that the regulator will start prosecuting individuals if they're bringing products in. So there does still, I think, there is still a gap here, but this is a gap, it's broader than the ACI. A lot of public safety laws do face this issue that if you're buying direct, there's no one really who the authorities latch onto in the UK, and it's a broader point beyond even just this one law.
Angus Heatley, do you think that customers, companies supplying these type of products, even the best of them, have good enough customer services to help people with default passwords to something unique to them? Because even if from today everything you buy has a complex default password set instead of just 1, 2, 3 or whatever, in order to change them, it's suggested you do in case somebody has compromised even the security of that complex password it comes with. Sometimes people need help to do that, and they just give up, don't they? Because consumer service isn't good enough.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. If a product comes with a good, unique password, it's probably fine to leave that password.
So you just leave it, do you?
If it's unique, I think it's good. I think if you're talking about creating a password, you would hope that the companies, knowing PSNs coming in, would have improved the flow, the process flow when you first
Well, you'd that, yeah, but I mean, customer service seems to have reached a terrible low, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's true. Look, the companies which currently have good customer support will probably address this. The companies which don't, then I think you're right, there is an issue. But again, it goes back to the broader customer support which a company offers.
Angus Heatley from Field Fisher Law and Icon Cameron's Cyber Minister. Thanks both for that. Lots of emails coming in about plastic lawns. Mary Sutherland, I'm delighted you're getting a debate going about plastic lawns. There was one here when we bought our house. I thought it made it look like a pub garden. We replaced it straight away with a tapestry lawn of chamomile thyme and heath peelwort, all creeping plants that attract insects and avoid the monoculture of a grass lawn. No mowing, although it does need weeding sometimes. Thanks for those. It's our phone-in tomorrow. We want to talk about trading down to somewhere cheaper to live. If you're thinking about doing that, or if you've done it, please get in touch. Tell us why, how it worked out. You can email you and yours at bbc.co.uk. Maybe moving because your rent or mortgage or other costs have risen. Mortgage brokers say they're getting more inquiries from homeowners considering downsizing. Are you one of them? So you can email us about it now, you and yours at bbc.co.uk. Please leave us your phone number in case we want to get back to you. The phone lines will be open tomorrow, and I'll be here with Call You and Yours at the same time, just after the midday news.
You and Yours was produced by Dave James. The studio managers were Mitch Goodall and Mike Smith. Let's have a look at the weather forecast before the World at One. Plenty to talk about in the World at One today. Darren Bett is with us. Hello, Darren.
Hello there, Tom. Plenty to talk about with the weather, actually. Today and tomorrow, we're going to find Atlantic lows bringing some further rain at times into the western side of the UK. But ahead of that, we're getting a southerly wind, which is why we're seeing it turning a bit warmer as well. And that warmth is mainly going to be affecting the eastern side of the UK today and tomorrow. And it's a lot warmer than it was yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast of England, where we're seeing the sunshine continuing through the rest of the day. Temperatures here 17 or 18 degrees. Across other eastern parts of England, we're likely to find temperatures of 15 Celsius, but it will probably tend to cloud over a bit more, but should stay dry. It's out to the west, across western parts of England and into Wales, where we're going to find the thickest of the cloud, and this is where we're going to see some further spells of rain from time to time, so temperatures 12 or 13 degrees. We have seen some wet weather across Northern Ireland. That's going to be replaced by some sunshine and potentially some quite heavy showers, temperatures of 13 degrees here. And in Scotland, temperatures are going to be 11 or 12 Celsius. Again, it's mainly the western side of the country that's seeing most of the rain. It'll be dry for the next few hours in the east, but that rain will push its way even into eastern areas by the end of the afternoon. Overnight tonight, it probably turns a bit more showery following the rain in Scotland, but we've still got a zone of cloud and patchy rain affecting Wales, parts of the Midlands, Northern England and the southwest of England, the showers fading away from Northern Ireland, and still dry and clear across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Temperatures no lower than 6 or 7 degrees. Heading into tomorrow, and the warmth is going to push its way a bit further north. It looks like it'll be sunny for a while through the Midlands, across eastern parts of England, before it tends to cloud over a bit in East Anglia and the southeast with the odd light shower possible. Temperatures here reaching 18 degrees, but it's going to be a warmer day for Northern England and the Midlands, 19 Celsius. It'll be warmer in Scotland, where we've got a few showers, 16 degrees at best, but cooler out to the west with some rain and some showers.
Darren, thanks very much.
On BBC iPlayer,
This story that I'd never heard before.
real people, unbelievable stories, including another body.
Deepfake videos can make someone appear as though they're saying or doing something that they're not.
There is no woman in the world who is safe from this technology.
Beyond Utopia,
There is no freedom of religion, no freedom of thought, no freedom of press in North Korea.
and Revenge, Our Dad the Nazi Killer.
They all believe Dad was responsible for taking out a Nazi fugitive living in Australia.
Storyville, watch on BBC iPlayer.
On 92 to 95 FM, on BBC Sounds and on your smart speaker. This is BBC Radio 4.
Hello and welcome to The World at One with me, Sarah Montague. Scotland's First Minister resigns.
After spending the weekend reflecting on what is best for my party, for the government and for the country I lead, I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm.
With that announcement, the starting gun sounds on finding a replacement for Humza Yousaf, just 13 months after he took office. We'll look at the leadership contenders and bring you analysis of what's next for the SNP and for Scotland. Also on the programme, from midnight, companies will face new checks and charges for food and plants imported from the EU.
Dianthus, which is carnations, solidago, gypsophilia, orchids and chrysanthemums. Overall, it's an increase of around 225,000. As a medium-sized company, you know, we can't absorb all those costs ourselves, so they will have to be passed on to the end user.
We'll ask how it will affect businesses and consumers. And choreography from across the globe on show in London. We'll hear about the launch of a new International Dance Prize. The BBC News is read by Jane Steele.
Humza Yousaf has announced he's to resign as Scotland's First Minister and leader of the Scottish National Party. He said he had underestimated the hurt and upset he'd caused with his decision last week to end power sharing with the Scottish Greens. The move prompted 2 confidence votes against Mr Yousaf and his party. He said he could have found a route through, but wasn't prepared to trade his personal values simply to retain power. He will stay in the post until a successor has been chosen. Our correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart has the latest.
Just a week ago, Humza Yousaf was still backing his party's power-sharing agreement with the Scottish Greens. Last Thursday, he kicked them out of government, an act the Greens described as betrayal. The Conservatives tabled a no-confidence vote in the First Minister, and with the Greens turning on him, it became evident that his political survival was unlikely. Rather than face this vote, Humza Yousaf announced in the last hour that he was resigning as SNP leader and will step down as First Minister once his party's picked a successor. He conceded that he had underestimated the level of hurt and upset that he'd caused the Scottish Greens and announced that it was time for someone else to take over. He finished an emotional statement saying that politics was a brutal business, and he described his family as everything to him. Mr Yousaf did not take any questions as he took his wife Nadia al-Nakla's hand and left the room.
America's top diplomat, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, has urged Hamas to respond positively to what he's called an extraordinarily generous offer from Israel over a possible ceasefire in Gaza. He was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Saudi Arabia, where the conflict has dominated the agenda. Negotiators hosting a Hamas delegation in Egypt say they're hopeful about a deal. Rory Davis reports from Jerusalem.
There's an increasing sense of urgency to try to reach a ceasefire in Gaza's 7-month-long conflict. The Israeli army is believed to be finalising plans for a full-scale military operation in the southern city of Rafah, where it says remaining Hamas fighters and leaders are based. Israel is pressing ahead, even though it's been urged by international allies, including the United States, not to attack Rafah because of the humanitarian crisis in the Palestinian territory. But there's also growing pressure from within Israel for the government to prioritise reaching a deal to release the around 130 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. And according to Antony Blinken, a ceasefire agreement is now within reach. The Israeli offer is thought to meet some of Hamas's demands over the withdrawal of Israeli troops from parts of Gaza and allowing residents to return to their home areas in the north.
UK and Irish ministers have been meeting at a conference in London, overshadowed by escalating tensions between the governments over asylum seekers. Dublin has said it's bringing forward an emergency law to send migrants back to the UK because of concerns the Rwanda scheme is encouraging them to travel from Britain to the Irish Republic. The UK government said it wouldn't accept any returns from the European Union via Ireland until the EU allowed Britain to send migrants back to France. The National Crime Agency has issued an alert to teachers across the UK about the growing problem of financially motivated sexual extortion of children. Parents and carers are also being encouraged to better understand the online blackmail known as sextortion, which is affecting an increasing number of teenagers, particularly boys. Mark Lebel reports.
This unprecedented move comes after a surge in cases of mainly young boys being tricked into sending intimate images online, then being blackmailed over them. Behind the screens are often organised criminal gangs from West Africa and Southeast Asia demanding money. It has led to young boys who are unable to pay and made to feel ashamed, taking their own lives. Reported cases around the world doubled last year to 26,000, according to the US National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. Today, hundreds of thousands of teachers in the UK are being urged to help prevent more children falling victim and better supporting those who do. A letter is also being sent to parents and carers so they can help with destigmatizing the problem for children at home, help them block malicious communication, and stop unwanted images remaining online.
Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has announced he will stay in the role, despite suggesting that he was about to step down. He had threatened to resign in response to accusations of corruption against his wife. Mr. Sanchez said his decision to remain had been influenced by a demonstration of support for him by thousands of his people in Madrid yesterday. From there, Guy Hedgecoe reports.
There had been intense speculation that Mr. Sanchez intended to resign, especially when it emerged that he had met with King Felipe this morning. But instead, the socialist leader said he would stay on as Prime Minister with more strength than before. Last week, a judge opened an investigation into his wife, Begoña Gómez, over allegations she had influenced the awarding of a government rescue package during the COVID pandemic. Mr. Sanchez has said the case is baseless and part of a right-wing campaign against him. The fact it had affected his family, he said, prompted him to consider his position. Opposition politicians have accused the Prime Minister of playing the victim and said he never seriously considered resigning.
The England Rugby Union international Billy Vunipola has apologised unreservedly after he was arrested by Spanish police for an incident at a pub in Mallorca. BBC Sport has been told that the 31-year-old was tasered yesterday in the capital Palma and subsequently fined £200 for resisting the law. Vunipola said the incident was an unfortunate misunderstanding, but there was no violence. His club Harrison said they will deal with the matter internally. The author C.J. Sansom, best known for creating the character Matthew Shardlake, has died at the age of 71. The Tudor lawyer first appeared in the author's first novel, Dissolution, published 21 years ago. He went on to appear in 6 more books.
Jane, thanks very much. An hour ago, Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, resigned, an event that has seemed increasingly inevitable
since he stood at the same lectern just 4 days ago to announce that he was pulling the SNP out of its coalition deal with the Green Party.
Unfortunately, in ending the Butte House Agreement in the manner that I did, I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. For a minority government to be able to govern effectively and efficiently, trust when working with the opposition is clearly fundamental. And while a route through this week's motion of no confidence was absolutely possible, I am not willing to trade my values and principles or do deals with whomever simply for retaining power. Therefore, after spending the weekend reflecting on what is best for my party, for the government and for the country I lead, I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm.
Well, the First Minister said he would continue in post until his successor is elected. He reflected on the party's decision to appoint him to the role just over a year ago.
As a young boy, born and raised in Scotland, I could never have dreamt that one day I would have the privilege of leading my country. People who looked like me were not in positions of political influence, let alone leading governments, when I was younger. We now live in a UK that has a British Hindu Prime Minister, a Muslim Mayor of London, a Black Welsh First Minister, and for a little while longer, a Scots Asian First Minister of this country. So for those who decry that multiculturalism has failed across the UK, I would suggest that the evidence is quite to the contrary.
And he ended his comments with an emotional tribute.
Politics and politicians, not unreasonably, I'm afraid, have often been maligned. However, I truly believe that when we get it right, and often we do, we are a force for good that can transform people's lives for the better. So to my colleagues in opposition, regardless of political party, I genuinely do wish you well. I bear no ill will and certainly bear no grudge against anyone. Politics can be a brutal business. It takes its toll on your physical and mental health. Your family suffer alongside you. I am in absolute debt to my wonderful wife, my beautiful children, and my wider family for putting up with me over the years. I'm afraid you will be seeing a lot more of me from now. You are truly everything to me. And although, of course, as you can tell, I'm sad that my time as First Minister is ending, but I'm so grateful and so blessed for having the opportunity that are afforded to so few to lead my country. And who could ask for a better country to lead than Scotland? Thank you very much.
Well, Chris Mason, our political editor, is at Butte House now. Chris, was his departure inevitable, or was there a route through, as he suggested, that there was a route through possible?
What you could hear there, Sarah, was fallibility. Fallibility on a human level, fallibility on a political level. By this weekend, and certainly by this morning, his departure was inevitable because of brutal arithmetic and a lack of willingness to accommodate the only way to make the numbers add up, and that would have been to do a deal with Alba, the other party of Alex Salmond that, alongside the Greens, is in favour of independence. He wasn't willing to do that. The Greens were not willing to support him. The numbers didn't add up, and therefore he was left with no choice but to resign. Otherwise, he would have been overwhelmed by those numbers in a vote of confidence. But there was potentially a path to survive this moment, and he hinted at it in that clip that you played just a few moments ago. Could he have handled that situation last week with the Greens better? Could he have allowed them to depart the so-called Butte House agreement, the arrangement between the SNP and the Greens, on their own terms, rather than be blown out of the front door in a way that led to that anger, that led to them to conclude that they wouldn't be able to support him? That'll be the big question in his mind as he leaves the office of First Minister in the coming weeks after a leadership race, because maybe, just maybe, that way he could have survived.
What happens next, Chris? Because we're now in a situation where he will stay on, but there will be, what, a more a conventional, something we, of course, remember from only just over a year ago, a race for First Minister again?
Yeah, the lesson of UK politics of the last few years is that you don't need a long memory to remember leadership races, and here comes another one, and it's underway already. So the SNP has to find itself a new leader. The nature of the constitutional arrangement means that there is never a vacancy for First Minister, and that the First Minister in this instance continues to be Humza Yousaf until the point at which a new SNP leader is selected and then attempts to command the confidence of the Scottish Parliament. That in itself is not going to be straightforward, and you will have opposition parties relishing the prospect of a governing party in turmoil and asking the question that opposition parties always ask, which is, can we have a election? In other words, a Holyrood election. So that question will hover as the SNP collectively and discontentiously, because that's the nature of a leadership election, attempts to work out if it can find someone that it can, as a collective, rally around in the hope that they can continue in government, albeit in the precarious position of minority government. That's not unprecedented here in Scotland, but that is difficult given the turbulence and therefore the inheritance that a new SNP leader would take on. It was hard enough for Humza Yousaf. It would be very difficult for any successor.
And that is definitely the pattern for the future. There won't be, whoever takes over, the prospect of either renegotiating a deal with the Greens or perhaps striking one with the Alba Party.
Well, there's a few definites in politics, and anyone taking on the leadership of the SNP is going to have to contemplate every conceivable option to make the numbers add up, because the numbers of SNP MSPs don't add up on their own. So in minority government, you either do a deal that offers you sustainability from one vote to the next, the likes of which existed until the collapse of it last week, or you are having to go from one vote to the next, cobbling together the numbers that you need. And when you are the best part of 2 decades in office, as the SNP is at Holyrood, and in the context of a UK general election year, finding friends across the political aisle is not going to be easy. So is the baked-in turbulence there for any future SNP leader, and that's why I think what will hover in the background, perhaps even in the foreground of the coming weeks' political tussles within the SNP, are bigger questions about the longevity of this Parliament. In other words, does there need to be a parliamentary election to the Scottish Parliament as the ultimate way of trying to shake out a longer-term solution to this?
Chris Mason, thanks very much. Well, Fergus Ewing is an SNP MSP for Inverness and Nairn, a former Cabinet Secretary. He's long opposed the coalition deal with the Greens. I asked him how he felt about Humza Yousaf stepping down.
Humza used to work for me. In fact, he used to call me boss, I think in a joking fashion, not so much of late, but I thought his resignation statement was a model of dignity. I think he followed the excellent maxim that Winston Churchill offered on these occasions: in victory, magnanimity; in defeat, grace. And therefore I respect his decision. It was the right one, and he did, of course, have many problems over his short term in office. Most of them were not of his making. Some of them were inherited from Nicola Sturgeon's time, and some of them, I'm afraid, arose with what I believe was a deeply damaging relationship with the Scottish Green Party, who are frankly zealots and extremists. They're not really politicians. So I think he ultimately acknowledged that that relationship had to come to an end, although his view about it is different from mine.
Well, you wanted him to end it. He did, and that's what brought him down.
Well, I think a number of things brought him down, but that was perhaps the causa causans, as a lawyer might say, and I'm a lawyer, so you're right. But I think it was bringing the SNP down, because, I mean, our support has plummeted. We've lost tens of thousands of voters. We need to build back trust and confidence, because those are the currencies of politics. And in my view, and I'm certain of this from the reaction of hundreds of people that I deal with, is that the Green Party were seen as hostile to around about half of the working population. He wanted to hand out P45s,
Okay,
believe it or not.
but we're in a situation where, I mean, you're very critical of the Greens, but it is the Greens that has been keeping the SNP in government. Who do you think now can win back, in a minority government, that support that you think the Butte House Agreement has lost for the SNP?
Kate Forbes, without a shadow of doubt, is head and shoulders above all the other candidates, and she also is not associated with the problems that I think caused Hamza to eventually to resign. And after all, I mean, Alex Salmond ran a minority government with 47 MSPs. We've got 63. So you only really need to win a budget debate and a motion of no confidence. The other debates, frankly, don't matter so much.
Except Alex Salmond was elected in an election, whereas it was Nicola Sturgeon who was elected at the last election, and now we're what, on the second leader, if you know, whoever it is. And that's the problem with the mandate, whether the SNP has a mandate to continue until 2026.
It's a fair point, and I think it's a finely balanced point. If there is an election in the next few months, there would also be an election in 2026. In other words, a new election would have a 5-year term. But the lack of a mandate is absolutely a fair issue. However, do people actually want another intervening, interposed election? People aren't that keen on snap, surprise elections. Some people will.
But do they want somebody they haven't voted for?
Kate Forbes has the biggest majority of any MSP. If any other candidate is chosen, because the Greens say they won't work with Kate Forbes, we're actually allowing the Green Party to determine who the next First Minister will be. Now, that's surely absurd.
Well, as you make the point that whoever is leading the party is going to need to rely on other MSPs' votes, other parties' votes, to get anything done. Now, are you happy to take those votes from wherever?
Well, it's not quite true. The executive powers of government are massive. It's only a very few things where parliamentary votes actually are important. A budget is the critical one. Votes of confidence are the other one. Legislation is normally a matter of political compromise.
Of course, anybody can call a vote of no confidence. So, but to answer my question, are you happy that if you're having to rely on, for example, Conservative votes to get the budget through?
Well, I think what people in Scotland want is politicians should work together far more than they do, that many of the political disagreements seem to be more about theatre than substance. There's no doubt in my mind that the people in the leadership of the other main parties, Tory, Liberal and Labour, respect Kate Forbes. They will trust her, they will work with her. She will give her word to them and she will implement it. And it's happened before with Alex, so why
okay, well, what about a deal with Alex, with the Alba party?
Well, I think we should, as a party that supports independence, work together with other parties that genuinely support independence. I should say I'm a friend of Alex Salmond's. I think he's.
So are you up for striking a deal?
Well, I think we should work with them. A deal is slightly different, but what I think we shouldn't do is excoriate them, attack them, because after all, they exist for the same reason as we do.
And arguably the Greens too. You're happy to attack them?
Lorna Slater last week said that independence was something that she would forfeit in order to do a deal with the Labour Party, so I'm afraid the Greens have shown that they're fair weather friends when it comes to independence for Scotland.
Fergus Ewing talking to me just before we came on air. Well, Alex Salmond is a former SNP First Minister, now leader of the Alba party, which has one MSP, Ash Regan, who defected from the SNP. Alex Salmond, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you think the SNP, going into its third leader since the election, has the mandate to stay in government to 2026?
That's a good question, which I will answer it. Can I just start with a word on Hamza Yusuf since he's resigned today? I mean, I feel for somebody in that position. I've been in that position myself some years ago, and so I wish Hamza and his family well for the future. Now, on your point about mandates, I think, as far as you said, it's a very fair question. I think the one thing you would have to have for a new leader is at least they would have to have a mandate from the SNP membership. I think the idea of ushering in another continuity, coordinated candidate given that that person hasn't either faced the electorate or the party, would be impossible. I think your question would certainly pertain then. I'm not going to choose the leader of the SNP. I did that a long time ago. That's up to the SNP. But I do think the SNP membership should have a choice.
Right. That could mean a very, like last time, a bitter contest before someone is chosen.
Well, I've fought for the SNP leadership a number of times, and we didn't have a single bitter contest. It was all very, very civil and comradely when I was competing for the SNP leadership, and I don't see why it shouldn't be like that again. But surely within the SNP there are people who can put forward the different views for how they would run an administration in the Scots Parliament and do it in a civil and polite manner.
As you heard there, Fergus Ewing, a big fan of Kate Forbes, who of course was running last time. If she ended up leading the party, could Ash Regan, as an Alba MSP, support her?
Well, Ash Regan said to Hamza Yousaf that she would support things that were in the interests of Scotland and independence, and that would apply to any SNP leader and First Minister who came in. Incidentally, I seldom take issue with your excellent political correspondent, but this idea that Hamza Yousaf didn't want to do a deal with Alapa is just simply untrue. At 7:30 this morning, he was trying to do a deal with Alapa and complimented the proposals we'd made as very reasonable. The reason he didn't do a deal with Alapa is there were forces within his own party who stopped him doing it. Let's call them the old guard. See, the ultimate problem for Hamza was he wasn't actually in control of his own party, which is why he wasn't able to survive over the next week.
So all this suggestion that over the weekend he realised there wasn't actually a route through, or one he was prepared to take, you're saying is nonsense. At 7:30 this morning, you're saying that he intended to carry on as First Minister in a deal with Alaba.
He said he was trying to carry on as First Minister, and he phoned Alaba to say that our proposals that we'd made and given them were very reasonable. We were waiting, and Ash Regan was waiting for a meeting with them, which had been promised. Now, look,
okay, but hold on one second. We heard him just saying there, just after midday, that I'm not prepared to trade my values and principles for retaining power.
Well, and that rather conflicts with the idea of him phoning at 7:30 this morning, but I tell you, he phoned at 7:30 this morning and described the proposals that Ash Regan had made as entirely reasonable. You know, and deliberately so. We didn't want to see a Tory unionist party succeed in toppling an SNP independent supporting First Minister, if we possibly could.
Okay, but so would you have voted him anyway, even if that deal hadn't been struck?
Oh, you can't jump your fences like that, because the circumstances might arise in the future. But what we did...
Well, hold on, you just said you wouldn't see a Conservative...
No, I said we didn't want to see a Tory unionist motion succeed against an independent supporting First Minister.
So you would have voted in favour of him, and that would have been enough votes?
Emily, if you want to get my second part of my sentence in order to try and secure that position, we put forward proposals which we knew would be reasonable and acceptable to Hamza Yousaf, as he acknowledged this morning. The problem that he had is he couldn't carry certain elements in his own party. There's a second problem as well. It's why we could get him through a vote of confidence. We couldn't guarantee to get him through a budget. That's certainly true. And that would apply to any SNP leader and First Minister coming in. Remember, the political arithmetic in the Parliament does not change. I think there is virtually no chance of a new incoming First Minister trying to get back into the Green arrangement. And therefore, it will be a minority administration, and Ash Regan becomes an extraordinary, and continues to be, an extraordinarily important figure in the Scottish Parliament.
So in that situation, whoever ends up as leader, can you see them surviving till 2026, getting the votes that they need?
Well, of course it can be done, as Fergus pointed out. I ran a minority administration between 2007 and 2011 for 4 years. But if you're addressing, once you become a minority, you must lose the arrogance of having a majority. You must approach every single political party, whether you agree with them or not, and try to find common ground that allows your proposals to go through. That's what we did in these 4 years. I think the problem with the SNP, perhaps, and, you know, I mean, it's something perhaps is natural. They've had a lot of easy years in government with big majorities being the biggest party. And some of that is rubbed off in terms of how they treat other political parties. I mean, I don't think there's anything they could have done about the Tories and Labour, but I suggest a different attitude from Hamza Yusuf and from others could have produced a different outcome. Alex Salmond, thank you very much. Do send us your comments on what you've just heard or any other story on social media, the hashtag BBCWATO, BBC Watto. Our email address to contact us that way, world@1@bbc.co.uk. Now, from midnight tonight, the government begins physical checks on animal and plant products coming into the UK from the EU. It's part of the new post-Brexit regulations. They also include new fees on imports. There are concerns about how much it will damage importing businesses. Our chief economics correspondent, Darshini David, has been to visit the wholesalers Tom Brown to find out how the flowers they import will be affected.
Have him, Joyce. As most of us are heading to bed, they're just springing to life at this plant and flower wholesaler. Despite the colour and foliage, it resembles an Amazon warehouse as staff have headsets and scanners and rapidly sort consignments into deliveries destined for florists and top-end hotels.
Colour? 987.
But the incoming charges and checks will impact operations. John Davidson is Finance Director at Tom Brown.
Though they claim the border control 24/7, the truth is the physical checks are only available between 7 AM and 7 PM. My product rolls off of the